Is it important to worry about and argue about this issue of color? What color the Egyptians were? Egyptians had no special color. They were Africans, light skin, dark skin, black, brown. You've got to understand that at the time of the early Egyptians, there were no Greeks yet, and there were no Romans. The Greeks and the Romans did not come until about 1000 BC. The Hebrews did not come in until the Egyptians were already in the 13th dynastic period. It was strictly an African culture.
Make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it, and eventually they will believe it. Adolf Hitler.
This is 3D imaging. You think this is spot on?
This is spot on. This was a 3D image of the mummy's head was done. It was then given to a forensics team and an incredible world-class reconstruction artist, so this is very accurate.
All right, here it comes. We're going to do the big reveal.
I'm ready.
Here we go.
We're going to knock it over.
2, 3.
Okay.
And there she is.
Wow.
Wow, that's intense.
Wow.
Isn't she amazing?
Yes.
She really is.
What is the parlor's trick? The parlor's trick is to convince you that it is not a lie. We have been convinced that if it is okay for white faces to play the role of historic figures of color, and that it is a white face that is somehow the symbol of universal humanity. The only way to reveal this parlor's trick is by identifying the injustice being pulled over our eyes.
This is one of the persons who was arrested. Why are you doing this?
Protesting.
Why is it so important to do this?
For justice.
And step back.
For all people.
Step back. Line it up.
You have spent much of your life studying the history of the ancient Egyptians. Who were the ancient Egyptians? How did they look?
Voilà, les Égyptiens anciens ressemblaient à cette tête que vous voyez. Voici le premier roi de la terre.
Here you have the first king of the earth, the very first. And the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, looked like this man.
To prevent yourself from being fooled by the parlor's trick, it's very important to know where you come from. So the first thing would be to outline the Kemetic timeline. There are several different periods, but the very important thing is to understand this transition of Kemetic history and understand when the foreigners came into the picture. The first period that we're going to outline is called the pre-dynastic period, which can vary up to about 25,000 BC to about 3000 BCE. During this period, the Kemetic people consisted of various different nomadic settlements and small tribal kingdoms. You can see the early drawings of them outlining the Sphinx. As mentioned earlier, the first king was called Narmer. Narmer was also speculated as being the Scorpion King number 2. He was the first one that formed these nomadic tribes and formed an actual kingdom called Kemet. In the next period, this is called the Old Kingdom. During this period, the Kemetic people demonstrated their carpentry and artistry skills. This is where the first pyramid, which was a step pyramid, which was created. And during this period, they demonstrated all the skills that they mastered over the course of 10,000s of years. The next stage in the Kemetic dynasty is called the First Intermediate Period. During this time, there was the government crumbles, and there was civil war that broke out, causing the government to be divided into several different kingdoms. It's very interesting around this time because the art is very limited because of that period, possibly due to the divide and the chaotic war and the disarray. The next period is called the Middle Kingdom period. During this period, Asiatic foreigners settle in the delta, their numbers increase rapidly. Eventually, these Asiatic tribes develop their own local governors according to their own rights. The second intermediate is civil war that outbreaks during the 13th and the 14th dynasties, which leaves Kemet vulnerable to the foreign attacks from the Hyksos. During the Hyksos War, Kemet obviously becomes vulnerable, and the Hyksos introduced chariots as well as bronze metalwork to the Kemetic people. This is kind of left up in debate because, they have been on the planet for a good couple 10,000 years by now, so it's kind of not really believable that they gave them bronze medaling. But okay, I'll go with that. Alright, so the next period is the New Kingdom era. And now this is very important in this period. Well, they all are important. But during this period, the military expanded. The Kemetic empire expanded into what we call the Middle East now. And so this is the era when Kemet was its richest, and it was the golden era. This is also the period when we developed our own pyramids, further developed more pyramids that are the ones that nobody can figure out and they want to give to the aliens. This is also the period when they try and pass everything off as being whitewashed and try and make everybody look white, when all the evidence points that everybody was very African with dark skin tones and Bantu features, because that's where we origin from, is from the Bantu tribes. Alright, so the next period that follows this great golden age is, of course, another intermediate. So it is a civil war and economic collapse. This leaves Kemet weak, as Kemet is now divided into 4 different kingdoms at this point. So there's 4 different royal families and dynasties. So this is where we start to really crumble within ourselves and leave ourselves open for foreign attack. The next period is called the Late Period or the Late Kingdom, and during this period is when all the foreigners from all regions start to attack Kemet. So this period is quite divided up into the Persian periods. We have the Syrians, the Babylonians, that are all kind of taking over. There's 2 periods of when the Persians take over, till eventually no native ruler, native being Bantu related tribes, no longer rule Egypt any longer. Alright, so the next period is called the Ptolemaic period, aka the Greco-Roman period. During this period, basically Alexander III brings an end to the Persian rule. Following the death of Alexander, his commander Ptolemy creates a Ptolemaic state in Egypt. During this time as well, you'll notice that the artifacts are drastically different in quality and detail. Also, the detail of the faces are very, very specific and very, very different than those of the previous dynasties. Alright, so in 30 BCE, Egypt becomes a Roman province after the death of Ptolemy's heir, Cleopatra. There are several different Cleopatras. This one is specifically the heir of Ptolemy. So they bleach our artifacts. All of these archaeologists that go there claiming that they're restoring our history is actually damaging our history. They go and dig up our burial sites, our ancestral burial sites, and they use chemicals which actually adjust or change the tone, lightening the skin tones of these artifacts. And unfortunately, we don't have the resources or the organization to stop them from doing it. But it's very important that you pay attention to the damage that's being done so that you can memorize these items before they're destroyed. The Kemetic people were more than capable of artistically recording the accurate details of their foreign figures, from the hair to the nose to the body shape, etc. When it came to foreigners being sculpted, there was no confusion whether or not they were black like the natives. It was very clear from the details of their face, from the shape of their nose, from the sculpture of their bodies, that they were not like the originals. Even the paint that they used on their mummification coffins was drastically different, so there was no mistaking them as being like the original black Egyptians. We are running out of time for experiencing our Kemetic heritage for what it should be. Let us take this time to memorize our legacy so that our children and our children's children aren't so easily fooled by the parlor's tricks.
After some 20 years, then what he goes there for is to lock the door. What goes around you criticize and sleep. Through a fractal on that breaking wall, I see you, my friend, and touch your face again.
Gotta come to shoot up the one.